Christmas. Everybody liked that idea. I liked the idea. I said, hey, yeah, we'll do that. And so we had this big box there that night. And I remember writing on my slip of paper, thinking about this long struggle I had with, you know, this leaning to follow Cherokee spirituality, not knowing if that was right. And so I wrote down one word, big capital letters, idolatry. Because that's how that had been portrayed to me over the years. It's idolatry. It's not Christianity, so it must be idolatry. So I wrote idolatry down on a slip of paper, and I folded that paper up real tight, and I dropped it in the box. I was ready to leave everything like that aside, if that's what Creator wanted me to do, if that's what God wanted me to do. And I dropped it in the box. We took that box outside after service, and we set it on fire. And you know, it's just a box, you know, cardboard box with some Christmas paper, maybe 50 or 60 slips of paper inside. I tell you what, flames shot up out of that box 20 feet into the sky, and sparks going way up and blending with the stars. And we were standing there looking at that. The guy, Rick was his name, he was the instigator in the first place to have the box. He said, wow, those people must have done some really bad stuff. Wow. That night marked a turning point for me. And I'll tell you what, I always, every day, you know, I had my times with the Creator where I would just listen and let the Creator speak. And that still small voice, you all know. That voice went away. And it's like, the Creator only said one thing to me. Meet me on this ark. Every time I prayed, I didn't get anything that I could put in a sermon or anything else. I was on my own with sermons and with everything else, but meet me on this ark was the only communication that the Creator would give me after that night. This ark is a mountain. It's the second highest point in the state of Missouri. The highest point is Palm Soft, where they made that big, awful reservoir that burst. Second highest point is this ark. And back then, the people who owned it didn't live there, and they didn't care who came in. Now I understand somebody lives there. I can't go there anymore. But Des Arc is a very sacred site to Chickamauga Cherokee people. I was not really aware of that at the time either. But I talked to my wife, who again was pregnant. I talked to my parents, and everybody agreed that I had to do that. And Jan took me as close as she could get me to Des Arc, and I went up on that mountain. Had to walk a few miles to get there, and then it's a big mountain. And I tell you what, I had no human being to put me on that mountain or take me off, but I had helpers with me all the time. And Creator showed me things on that mountain. And a process began. The process of laying my idols aside. And let me tell you something, none of my idols had anything at all to do with Cherokee spirituality. Nothing at all. January 1999, the first Indian Fellowship was born. And before long, Mid-American Indian Fellowships have grown into the network that they are today. And by the way, each one was asked for. You know, we never go and ask people, do you want to start a fellowship? You know, we wait. And the very first one was like that. It was like Cherokee elders from Joplin, Missouri came and said, you know, why don't you start some sort of Indian church where things are done the Indian way? And I said, that's a good idea. You praying about that. And then, you know, a year or so later, why don't you start an Indian church where things are done the Indian way, and why don't you start that in our house? I said, okay. Pray about that, and we'll get together, and we'll talk about that. And so that's how it happened, and that's how it happens. We don't really ask people; they have to come and ask for that. in the spring of 2003. I went to a Cherokee naming ceremony. And you know, Uncle Richard Traker, I consider him to be the foremost culture bearer of his generation. From his generation to my generation, if it hadn't been for Uncle Richard, everything would have been lost. Because he was the only one that went to the elders who were before him and said, could you teach me? Could you share with me? And so, you know, by the 1970s, or the late 1970s, everybody was interested, but back in the 50s and 60s, nobody was interested or courageous enough, except Uncle Richard. And if it hadn't been for him, all that would have been lost. And so, you know, Uncle Richard had done these naming ceremonies for a long time, and I knew about them, but I was still, you know, a little hesitant to go that far. But finally I did. I went and talked to Uncle Richard about naming. And he invited me to come to his ceremony. And I was coming to the ceremony, and I remember getting out of the car and going to the grounds there that he kept, and thinking, what would they say back at the seminary? They say, what are you doing going to a fully traditional Indian ceremony? What are you doing? Submitting yourself, body and soul, to a fully traditional Indian spiritual helper. And I thought about that. And then it came to me that there was a young man who lived a long, long time ago in a far-off country, who one day laid his tools down and he went to a fully traditional ceremony of his people, a fully traditional cleansing ceremony. He walked 80 miles to get there and put himself, body and soul, in the hands of a fully traditional spiritual helper of his people. And said, baptize him. And that man was Jesus. I thought, I follow Jesus. That's what I would tell him back at seminary. I follow Jesus. Okay, so I went there. And I remember, you know, going through the naming sweat. You know, we go to the sweat house and the sweat lodge and going through the sweat and coming out and being scratched in the traditional way, and ears pierced so I could hear Creator calling my name. And I remember stepping into the naming circle with Uncle Richard, and hearing him pronounce my name to the four directions of the people and to Creator, back from whom my name is from. And the tears came. And they washed away a lot of things. Mid-American Indian Fellowships is not technically a Christian organization. We do have Christian people within the fellowships, but there are many people, such as myself, who do not identify ourselves as Christian. And yet we say we follow Jesus. We're followers of Jesus. We follow Jesus in the context of our native cultures. We look at Jesus, we look at his life and his teachings, and we understand those in the context of resistance to imperial colonization. And so Mid-American Indian Fellowships' organizational focus is on the decolonization of previously Christianized American Indian people and the restoration of indigenous culture. And the two go together. You have to take something out before you can put something in. And if you take something out without putting something in, bad things could happen. Jesus said that, right? You see, you throw a demon out, and if you don't replace that, well, more demons will come. You know, I'll paraphrase a little bit, but that's kind of what he said. Indian fellowships meet independently, and yet we come together for an annual gathering each year. And then we have the Doxy Grounds. Now my family, we live on a small subsistence farm in Bates County, Missouri, all the way across the state. We raise indigenous heirloom crops, and the farm is now the site of the Doxy Grounds, which was established in the spring of 2010. So it's 2 years old now. We've kept the sacred fire of Cherokee people there, a fire that's been kept, by the way, for over 5,000 years by people, except for the time when it was put to sleep for a while, because just had to be. Okay? It was too dangerous to keep ceremonies like that for a time. But that fire has been kept for over 5,000 years, and it's kept now at the Doxy grounds. And I'll tell you why we named it Doxy grounds. It has to do with the story. Doxy is our word for terrapin. You know the terrapin, the box turtle? In the old days, terrapin was much, much bigger than it is now. In fact, all the animals were much bigger. The animals of the day are the shadows of those that once were. So terrapin, his shell was 10 feet long. And he was a great warrior in those days. He would go off to war, you know, and come back with scalps on his belt, you know. And everyone was afraid of terrapin. But there were some vengeful wolf people on it who caught terrapin one time. And they bound him with cords, and they brought him into their town. And they were trying to figure out, think up ways that they were going to kill him. And they find out, I'm shortening the story, but they decided that they were going to throw him off a cliff, off a high cliff, into the river. And this was a place where the river water was really shallow, just a rock bottom. And as terrapin was hurtling down toward that stony bottom of that river, he was thinking, this is probably it. I'm probably going to die today. And he crashed right into the rock bottom of that river. And his shell was smashed into pieces. And his blood was flowing off down the shallow waters of that river as the wolves watched from the high bank above. And terrapin was in great pain, and he could have just died, you know. He could have just given up and died right there in the river. That would have been the easy thing to have done, but he didn't. Terrapin reached out, one front foot, another front foot, and he crawled. He pulled himself up the far bank, which was a low bank, and he pulled himself up on the bank of the river, and he began to sing. Udaye-wo, udaye-wo. I sew myself together. That's what he was singing. Udaye-wo, udaye-wo. And the wolves, as they watched from the high cliff above, they saw as the pieces of terrapin's shattered shell began to come together. Udaye-wo, udaye-wo. Terrapin continued to sing, and the pieces came together and they fused. Udaye-wo, udaye-wo. And terrapin stood up and he walked away. Now he walked away that day much smaller than he'd ever been.